I hate collecting papers, so I decided I'm just not going to do it anymore. I'm going to explain you a little bit about how I do that and my open classroom and my rapid feedback loop. So if you're interested, stick around. Collecting papers is just the worst. If you think about if you have 80 or 90 students, you're going to have those papers at least overnight. It's going to take you to do a good job of giving feedback on that paper. It's going to take anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes per student. You are looking at a few hours worth of homework for yourself in order to get those papers back in even a moderately rapid time frame. It's not good practice because everything we know says that we need to get the feedback to the students as quickly as possible. And even if you're not collecting physical papers, even if it's digital through like Google Classroom, you know that that's going to pile up eventually and you're going to have to take a whole weekend, and the student, by the time they get that paper back, they're not going to look at the feedback. So I wanted to stop doing that. And I needed to figure out a way to stop doing that. And I took inspiration from what we'd call open world games. Sometimes they're called sandbox games. And these games are really cool. And some of my favorite games are these open world games. Things like Final Fantasy games, Elder Scrolls Skyrim game, other games like that, where you start off, you have this big map, and you can go anywhere on the map. A lot of times what happens is that you are directed into a certain location based on missions. So you start off in one location, a character gives you a task that you need to go somewhere, some distance across the map so that you can achieve the mission. And when you, along the way, you fight battles, you run into other non-playable characters or NPCs, and you might get side quests. And the really cool thing about this is that there's no one right or wrong way to play the game. So as I began to think about, I'm tired of collecting all this work. What I realized was that the reason I was doing all that collecting of papers and taking them home and grading them and bringing them back in the next day or two, the reason I was doing that is because I was following a linear structure. I was following something more like a side-scrolling game, like Super Mario Brothers. You start in one location and you follow along till you get to the final checkpoint, and all of my students were on that same linear progression on the same day, and the person that was in charge of that was me. Just like on Super Mario Brothers, you have 200 seconds to get from one end of the map to the other end of the map. And that was causing me a lot of extra work because I wanted to get this feedback back as quickly as possible. So I had to come up with this new system, and I said, let's take a look at open worlds. Let's create a classroom that has different missions, different time frames, so that I'm not collecting all the papers at once. How do I stagger these assignments? So how do we create an open world in a classroom? The idea that I developed, and this probably won't work for everybody, but I teach a U.S. history class, and I realized that I have skills that I wanted to develop in addition to content acquisition. So we have basic checkpoints throughout a unit. So I have a 3-week unit on westward expansion, and I have a series of options that students can complete during that unit. But there's no one right path to completing the different options, and you don't even need to complete all of the missions as a student to demonstrate that you've achieved some skill, historical skill, whether it's analyzing a source or finding research, or maybe it's developing a map, or whatever the case may be. In gamification, sometimes we call that a side quest. Right now we're getting through Unit 1 in my class, and the students are starting to fill them nicely, and they're getting it done with their missions. Some of them are going off on side missions. But what's nice for me in this rapid feedback loop that I want to develop is they're not finishing it all at one time. So in my class, I have the students sort of laid out in different, I call them squads. So they're groups of 4, sometimes they're less. And I spend my entire class moving from squad to squad to squad, checking in, seeing what their progress is, seeing if they needed help with anything, A lot of times they're on completely different missions throughout the day. One group might be doing battle prep, which is my term for low-level content acquisition. They're watching some videos, whether it's my videos that I've created, maybe there's some stuff we found off YouTube. We're going to talk about this as blended learning, but they are working on taking some Cornell notes or some other activity dealing with that. Some of them might be doing that, and that's okay. Some might be working on another mission. So we have one mission where we're reading some primary sources about Thanksgiving, and we're comparing them to some Native American interpretations of that compared to sort of the mainstream one. So some people might be working on that. Some are reading some primary sources about slavery and how it relates to the Constitution from people that were actually there, and then reading secondary sources about that. So some are on that mission. But what's really nice is some students are moving very quickly through this, and other students are moving a little bit more slowly, and that's all right. So as students finish, we talk and we have a little conference. So as I'm floating around the room, I can see which students are finishing up, and I can go directly to them and see what they need. Would they like to talk about what they have so far? Do they think they're finished? And we can sit and we talk for a couple of minutes about the work that they've done. And I can say that, you know, X, Y, and Z need to be polished. You need to add a little bit in a different area. And through our conversation, they're getting that same feedback that I'd normally be writing on the paper. And it's happening instantly. We are talking in the conference. They can then go and rapidly make the adjustment that they need to adjust. And then within a few minutes, they can show me that work again, and have they made the corrections? Have they processed? Have they reflected on this in that conference that they're having one-on-one with me in real time? That's a rapid feedback loop. Now, there might be somebody that needs to wait a couple of minutes to talk to me to get that conference in, but they're getting the feedback very quickly, and I can respond to them in a reasonable amount of time. That is much better than a student doing work, waiting to hand it in to me in the classroom, me taking it out of the classroom, scoring it, giving feedback, and handing it back. Because once the student thinks that that assignment is done, they're not going to read the feedback. So by having a conference, they don't know if they're submitting a final product or not. In their mind, they're not submitting finished work. They are in the process of giving me iterations of that work. There's always a process of revision possible. So you might think of it as a rolling deadline, but really what it is a rapid feedback loop. Now, the question might become, what do we do with students who finish early? Well, that's where side quests come in. So during Unit 1, if they finish the main mission or one of the missions that I've selected that demonstrate their skill, they can go do another one for additional XP or additional points. There are always different paths that we can go on. There are different quests that they can go on once they've finished a main mission. And that's where we are now. We have, next week, we're going to be doing some of our battles. So we'll be doing a battle clash. We will be taking our first common assessment, which is required by my district. And we will see and get that feedback as to where we're standing together as a class, both in terms of my instruction, we can see how we're doing with that, and the students can see how they're doing in terms of acquiring that content that the district and the state says that they need. Meanwhile, we're still having these constant back and forth feedback loops. The way I like to think about it is it's similar to when Mario starts, right? When you start the Mario game, you don't know the first time you play it, the little Goomba mushroom guys come walking at you and you're bumped into them. Oh, you've died. You can immediately restart. You can immediately realize, oh, I can jump on top, and that's how I defeat my enemies. It's a very rapid feedback loop, and by setting my classroom up as an open world where there's no one right path to complete the missions, and there's a lot of room to explore the content, I've opened myself up as a teacher where I can move away from being the one giving the direct instruction. I've moved away from being the one that has got the students on that linear path. And now I have an open world. I can float and I can go from squad to squad, and I can give that rapid feedback that the students need so that they're in that constant state of iteration and revision so that we can make the best possible product. Now, I hope you have thought about this, and it might not be the system that works best for you, but I hope it inspires you to think about how you can increase that rate of feedback in your classroom. If so, please drop me a line, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And if you like this idea of open worlds and rapid feedback loops, please hit the like button and feel free to subscribe. And I would love to see you again here at Classroom Powerups. Thank you very much, and have a nice weekend.